Point four kind of circles back a little bit. We have deflation versus disinflation. I know we talked about that a little bit at the top of the show, but definitely more to discuss in a little bit more detail here.
Yeah, so you know what, let's go back. And
Sure.
I want to talk about the example that I used in the written version of the 5 things. And, for people who are interested in seeing that and seeing the graphs, feel free, go to the deepknowledgeinvesting.com. You can click subscribe now. There's a free option and you'll get the 5 things. You'll get it a couple days late, but you can read the full version and see the graphs. But the example I gave, and again, this is the difference between the way American consumers view the economy and Wall Street views the economy. So imagine that, you've got your weekly grocery bill of $100 and, that's tight for a lot of people. And, most Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. People don't have, thousands and thousands of dollars of reserves. And so imagine now that your weekly grocery bill goes from $100 to $120. And, like Rob, for certain people, they're like, okay, $20, who cares, right? No big deal, right? It's for a lot of people, it's a rounding error, but for a large number of people, that's a 20% increase in something that's a big expense for them. And when finances are tight, that $80 a month can make a huge difference.
No doubt.
All right. So let's imagine that happens in year one. And now we get to this year and your grocery bill goes from $120 to $130. And you've got people saying, this is fantastic. We have disinflation. Okay, well, true, right? Our inflation rate went from 20%, going from $100 to $120. And when you go from 120 to 130, that's a ballpark of 9% change, it's less than 10% change. And so it's great, things are getting better. Except if your $100 grocery bill is hard, and your $120 grocery bill means you have to start cutting back on other things, your $130 grocery bill may be the difference between making ends meet and not. And so having people say, hey, congratulations, isn't this disinflation wonderful, can be maddening for a lot of people and be really hard for a lot of people. Now, we got some really interesting retail results last week where the narrative actually started to shift from disinflation, which is the maddening example we just gave, to actual deflation. And the most interesting one came from Walmart, which is often a good proxy for the health of the American consumer. It is a massive retailer. They're a diversified retailer, and I believe they're in every state. So you have geographic dispersion, you have different kinds of goods. And Walmart reported an increase in comparable store sales, but they said that prices of some goods are actually down from last year, and they're already lowering prices to pass on some of those savings to the consumer. And so, we've got this whole narrative that, you were just talking about, where you've got spending is high, credit is high. Last week, we talked about lower shipping rates.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about a lower CPI, a lower PPI, lower shipping costs, and now we're talking about lower actual costs to retailers. And so, that's why we're saying this is, like the disinflation versus the deflation issue, because in some places you'd say, wait a minute, we've got a roaring economy and there's still tons of consumer spending and tons of demand. And, you've got a massive retailer like Walmart saying, not so fast, we're starting to see some prices turn. So it'll be interesting to watch.
Right. Yeah. And the chart that's provided, just for everybody, if you haven't seen the 5 things email, talks about absolute value, right? Which, to your point, I used to spend 100. Yeah, I'm not spending as much at as fast of a rate, but I'm still absolutely spending more at the end of the day.
Yeah, and let's be honest with people, and I'm going to apologize for like what I'm about to say is going to be disturbing to a lot of people. But for those of you who, in my hypothetical example, right, your grocery bill over a couple of years went from $100 a month to $130 a month. And again, that can be hard for a lot of people, that change. Your grocery bills are not going to go back to $100,
Mm-hmm.
right? Even if we have a reduction of inflation, even if inflation goes to zero, right, you're not going to get 30% deflation. In this example, we're not going to see the prices that we saw just a few years ago. And so if you're in a tough spot right now, you're it's not going to get better, and you're either going to need to find a way to make more money or to cut expenses, because inflation might slow and we might get a little deflation, but your grocery bill isn't going down by 30%. That's just not going to happen.
What would be a notable movement, in your opinion, just in terms of a deflation movement? Like, are we talking 5%, 10%? Obviously 30% is humongous, and that's not happening, right? But I
Yeah,
mean,
that's not going to happen. I think the things that would really crash the CPI is if we start to get more housing supply on the market, where that's
okay.
making up, where you've had prices up 40, 50, in some markets, 70, 80% over
Yeah.
the last 3 years. And mortgage rates have gone from 3% to, they went to 8%. Now they're, between 6 and 7%. You could see something happen there. Long term, I'm very bullish on energy prices, but certainly short term, in the case of a recession or worries about demand, you could have energy, which is also a big part of the CPI, get cut. But I can tell you the Federal Reserve is not going to allow 5 or 10% deflation. Once that CPI turns negative, you better believe Powell is going to turn incredibly dovish, which is, just Wall Street speak for he's going to pivot to lower interest rates. That, combined with the fact that Congress is spraying an extra $2 trillion a year on balance sheet into the economy, which we talked about last week, means you're not going to see big negative numbers. And the minute that CPI turns negative, the Fed will lower rates and try to spark more inflation. Like that,
Right.
there's no way in the world we're getting to lower prices.
Makes sense.